A lot of people and organizations care about Black and brown kids and their future. But what are we missing? Welcome to the Road to Ambition podcast. In every episode, we're exploring a new angle on what our teens need to thrive in college, career, and in life. We're on a mission to turn every teen's smartphone into a device that guides them towards personal transformation and truly thriving. Join our founder, Remi Sobomehin, along with others, as we delve into the journey of ambition and share insights on making a meaningful impact on Black and brown teens. Thanks for joining us.
So good to be here again with Remi. I'm Scott. Schimmel. I'm with kind of like two separate outfits coming together to have, you're like watching us on a date. And this isn't the first date. This is like, we're going steady, man. Like we're serious in this relationship, and it's time to go backwards a little bit. And just as a setup for this conversation, the reason we're doing this is a few reasons. I just have always found that it's fascinating, generally, about why someone does what they do and where that comes from, like the storyline, the through line. But I've also found that it's a really useful exercise to do for everybody. And if you're paying attention to this, chances are that you care about kids and their development. And as Remi and I have done work both together and separately for so many years, helping kids process where they come from is one of the most helpful foundational pieces for them. It truly can become an asset. So as you're listening in, we want you to be intrigued by Remi's story and the story of Ambition Angels. We also want you to be taking some notes about how these types of questions and even the setup and framework of this can be useful for you, for sure, but also for the kids that you serve and care about. So with that, what we're going to dig into is, Remi, your story and why you're doing what you're doing and how it all got shaped. So can you take us back to the origins of Ambition? And I don't know how far back it goes, if this is just a great idea a couple of years ago or anyways, take us back.
Yeah. No, I kind of view my career as a youth developer as like a point in a long history of youth developers. Like I'm just one of many. As far back as time goes, really, people have been looking at kids, seeing potential that the kid doesn't see in themselves, investing in them with a vision for the future, in hopes that vision comes true. So I really do see myself as just one of many youth developers. But the first youth developer that I saw was my dad. And I grew up in a home that was really devoted to youth development from the jump. And quite frankly, my dad's story even starts when he came here to America from Nigeria when he was 18 in the 60s. He went to Georgetown, in our nation's capital.
Oh my
and
gosh.
Being a poor immigrant, he went to live in the low-income community. And little did he know that the low-income community there was all people who looked like him. And it was confusing to him. He didn't understand what was going on, but felt a lot about it. You know, these felt like his people, but they were hurting. So he saw all of the gaps that are well documented throughout history. He saw them up close and personal. But the one that really bothered him the most, as he went from Washington, D.C. to St. Louis to Houston and then ended up in Portland, the one that bothered him the most was seeing young kids, two issues with young kids. He saw young kids not being given a quality education. He was just like, when I go to the schools with kids who look like me, they look very different than the other kids. And so that was just confusing and bothersome and just did not feel fair to him. But then as he started to try to get in the work and do something about it, he noticed that kids just didn't see the opportunities in America the same way he saw them. And that bothered him too. So he was like, this is all messed up. And he comes from a small village in Nigeria where like problems aren't like seen as systemic problems. It's just problems to be solved. There's a homeless person. We make sure they eat. We bring them into our house. There's a kid who's not learning. We all put our arms around them. So like this whole, it takes a village to raise a child. We love this in the West because it's like, oh, it's cute and it represents. But that was real for him. That was life. So when he came here and saw that, he was like, I'm just going to do something about it. And he became a youth developer. Wouldn't have called himself one, wouldn't have
Yeah.
called himself a nonprofit leader. He would just call himself somebody who cared, saw something and did something about it. And so he started a nonprofit in Portland, this kind of classic community leader. He just like did everything, went way above and beyond. He did not see it as a job, more so as a calling. And so if a kid was hurt, it wasn't just you come to the after school program. It was you come home and live with us.
Wow.
If he saw a homeless person, it wasn't just I'm going to give you $1. It was come and live in our basement, right? Like that's the home I grew up in. And so that really shaped just how I view the world.
Yeah.
My dad just believed in kids so much and went above and beyond for them. And so it was cool because like that gave me the opportunity to do a lot of different things. I saw so many different people and I connected with different people. One of those people was my best friend. He was. I met him in diapers. Our older brothers were best friends, and we ended up going to the same school. He ended up coming to the after school program. His name is Dimitri. He's our tech partner, and spoiler alert, created the app. But we just clicked, from jump. We liked the same things. We were super competitive. We loved to learn. We loved to create. We were super active. And so we just did everything together all day at school, all day after school. Then he would come to the athletic club with me and my dad, and then oftentimes come home and sleep. And little did I know, I found this out a lot later, but I didn't know how much he was going through at home, and just the struggles and kind of symptoms of poverty were kind of in his household, in his family. And so it was a really tough situation to grow up in, but we were each other's distraction from all the other things. Like we just looked at each other and said, let's play dominoes. Let's build a website. Let's do we just did random things together. And what kind of changed along the way, and this is kind of more to the backstory of like people who invested in us. I'm the youngest of 4 boys who grew up in the house. I have we're 6 siblings all together, but 4 who grew up in the house. And my oldest brother, when we were in the 4th grade, got into Stanford. And we drove him down in my dad's 16 passenger van, all the way down with all of my brothers, and Dimitri came with us. And we drove up. I don't know if you know, been to Stanford and like drove into it. It's like this idyllic scene up Palm Drive. Yeah. And we were just like, what in the world is this? Right. And so my brother was super excited. We met all of his friends. They were all super cool. And then we're hearing this is like the best school in the world. And I'm just like, whoa, like I want to go here, and like any little brother. And we really looked up to my older brother, Tunde. And we said, hey, man, we want to go here. And he said, are you sure? I said, yeah. He said, it takes a lot of hard work. I said, yeah, we're in. Like, that's fine. If we can go here, man, that would be awesome. Let's do it. And so he said, hey, if you want to do this, I'll teach you how to do this. And he really saw it as an opportunity. It's like when a kid says, I want to go to the NBA. Like, I love it. I'm like, cool. Then meet me at 4 a.m. tomorrow. Right. It's like, whatever your dream is, let's take that. And so he did that. And that became like what we wanted. That became like the driving force from 4th grade on.
The two of you, both you and Dimitri.
Yeah, both me and Dimitri. Both of us, that became our goal.
Yeah. That's wild. I mean, it's interesting. Actually, before we jump into time at Stanford, I know what stuck out to me is hearing about your dad coming from a village in Nigeria to Georgetown. Like, just can you, how the heck did that happen?
Well, education was like the way out, of a third world country. It was like America really was this land of opportunity. And it was once the opportunity arose to go, then everybody was like, that's where we want to go. And so any kid with potential who seemed like they wanted to work hard and go were invested in. And so the village kind of really wrapped their arms around my dad and said, we want you to go get educated and come back. Unfortunately, he ended up not coming back because he saw and found a vision here. But that was also, that was fine for them. Like that was, it was like one of our own is there living out the dream. And so
Yeah.
that, you know, the American dream is really real to an immigrant, right?
Yeah.
It's a little harder to see that as a native born African American,
Interesting.
but
Yep.
I kind of grew up in a little different household who saw the
Mm-hmm.
possibilities here slightly different.
Yeah. There's like there's a thread there of mindset that, as you tell that
Yeah.
story about you visiting Stanford, it's like,
Yeah.
there's something in you, there's something that was kind of, whether it's your DNA or I'm actually curious how your dad transferred that kind of mindset to you. Were there phrases that he would use that stick out to you, like echoes in your head?
Yeah. I tell people all the time, my dad used to say, you're going to be the president of the United States. Not the first black president, just you're going to be the president. Like that's how he thought. Right. And this is a classic kind of Nigerian culture, or growing up in a Nigerian family. It's like you have, you know, a couple choices. You could be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. Right. And that was kind of like what it was for us. He was like, it's possible here to make it in a way that can provide and change the trajectory of your future. And so that is what you're going to do. And so, and there's a lot of elements of it that I love. There's a lot of elements on a different podcast we could talk about around parenting and the impact of like high pressure and, you know, and kind of feeling like you're only good if you succeed and achieve, you know. But and so as much as that was real, but what was more real for us was belief in us. Like he felt it, and he was like, "You're going to work your tail off and achieve." And so we did. Like 4.0s were just expected. Stanford was college was expected. You know, my dad had a PhD, my mom had a master's degree. Like when you're around a home where education at its highest level is the norm, then you live into that. And so even as a youth developer, once I got into youth development, having that high expectation became like really, really important for expressing to kids without expressing it to them verbally that like, I believe in you and you can succeed.
That's interesting. And one of the things you're sharing that I can relate to, that sense of high pressure to be successful, it's not unique to Nigerian households. That's might be, that's true for a lot of different families, but there's something different about, I don't know, there's something, I would imagine recognizing where your dad came from, that has an extra weight to it, like of what's possible. I am curious too, before we really get into Stanford time. And I hope this doesn't sound insulting at all. I don't know how to phrase this without kind of being dangerous in that world, but
it's all good. Go for
your
it.
dad having a PhD, and going into youth work, nonprofit work is not, it's not on that ladder of lawyer, doctor, etc. Was that an issue? Was there like a shadow side of that? How did you make sense of that?
It's a really good question. Honestly, that was a struggle for me early on, especially because I saw in many of the kids who were in our program, who became my best friends, I saw the symptoms of poverty. And I was like, man, poverty is bad. Like this should not be the case. Kids should not be growing up in poverty. But yet we were growing up in, like, I like to tell people, we didn't run a nonprofit. He ran a no profit. Like he did not fundraise. He did not have like development operations and all of that stuff. Like, no, it was just, you know, bare minimum to make it happen. But my dad was really spurred by his faith in what he believed was right and how he believed God designed people to be. And if that wasn't happening, he was going to do something about it. And that, I think that kind of is that was in direct contrast with this hyper focus on us being doctors. And that's why none of my brothers are doctors, lawyers, or engineers. We're all like in youth work. Really? My dad, you know, it's weird because he'll say like, you know, I wish one of you would have become this and that. It's like, well, we learned from you. We saw you, we heard you, and we're continuing in your path. And so I think it's even it's tough for him because on one end, he cares about this and he loves this, but yet he wanted kind of generations of financial stability, success, you know, all
Right.
that America meant to him growing up.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Stanford time. I've had this big respect for Stanford. I think everybody does, unless they went to like USC or something. But generally speaking, even then, there's a huge respect for the institution. What did you study there? How did time at Stanford shape you in the same way? That's part of your backstory. It's a long chapter, I'm sure. What was the impact, the residue of Stanford on you?
Yeah. I mean, both me and Dimitri, like right when we got to Stanford, it really hit us that we had achieved something big. Like
Mm.
this was a goal since fourth grade.
Yeah.
That like, yes, we believed and we did talk very confidently, but there's always in the back of the mind, like, whoa, what are we doing? And
Yeah.
then it
Yeah.
happened and it's like, whoa, this light bulb went off. It's possible.
Mm.
Like,
Yeah.
and my story is very different than Dimitri's. Again, growing up in a household where a dad with a PhD, mom with a master's, like it was expected. It wasn't that
Yeah.
surprising that I achieved that. But
Right.
Dimitri, first in his family to go to even think about college,
Hmm.
right? And the household he grew up in, college was not the natural trajectory, much less Stanford. And so when he
Yeah.
got there, we're like, well, like it's possible, regardless of where you come from, to get there. So how do we replicate these stories? Like this shouldn't be
Yeah.
the exception. How do we move this more towards the norm? And so for me, I really wanted to understand the history of the problems that plagued specifically the Black community, right?
Hmm.
And how those systemic issues that we're all well aware of, how they
Mm-hmm.
came to be, and how those affected an individual growing up in that society, right? Like
Okay.
kids are individuals. They're growing up in an
Yeah.
environment that they did not shape. And
Yeah.
so how does that environment affect how they think? And so I studied African American studies and psychology.
Okay.
And I mean, in terms of how it shaped me, I went through a lot of phases, a lot of emotional phases, a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, digging into what has been done to Black people since we got here to America.
Mm-hmm.
And though my dad is an African and my mom is European, white American, I didn't grow up in a African American in that sense, like Black American
Yeah.
home,
Yeah.
like trajectory of slavery, but I grew up around it, and so I felt like I was a part of it. And
Huh.
so it frustrated me and I wanted to do something about it. And so I thought about like the systemic route, but I knew that I was more called to the one by one route, the on the
Okay.
ground, boots on the ground. And so I wanted to take that and go directly into the field. And Dimitri, meanwhile, it was interesting. Both of us really united. We taught classes in East Palo Alto together throughout our time at Stanford. But he saw the writing on the wall around technology. Like he was like, man, the wave of the future is tech.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful he saw that because we'd both just be, classic youth developers in the community if not for him seeing that. And he knew he had really like a skill and a real talent to create and think at that level. And so he always wanted to figure out how can we leverage technology to do that. And so studied kind of educational technologies while he was at Stanford.
When did the dream pop up for the two of you to do something together professionally?
We have been starting things together since the second grade. Since we were knocking on doors together.
So there was no plan.
Lawns.
It was just what you do.
Yeah, it just kind of felt like people knew it was Remi and Dimitri, like Remi and Dimitri. There was even at Stanford, people would say it's Remitric, and they would think we're very similar, even though we're very different. But just because we did everything together, and so even while we were at Stanford, we like launched this this startup around trying to give access to Stanford students to tutor folks nationwide. It was really really cool idea that didn't get off the ground, but we always were mulling around ideas of how we would work together. After Stanford, we went kind of separate ways career wise, but there was always this kind of gravitational pull, like how could we merge our worlds?
What did you do after Stanford? What you said you wanted to go more one-on-one. What did you do?
Well, funny enough, it was a complete diversion. I got really into acting while I was at Stanford.
Seriously?
Yeah, I acted in some plays, and I just caught the bug. And I couldn't make sense of it right as I was graduating. I was like,
Huh.
no, I thought I would help my people, but I want to act. How does this work? So I was like, man, what if I go down? If this is a real talent I have, what if I go down there, become a star, and then I could really give back? Like, that was like a thought to me. But
Yeah.
I got reconnected right afterwards with a mentor of mine, Jeff Camarillo. He was running East Palo Alto Academy.
Okay.
This charter school. And he was a brand new vice principal there. And he was like, Ram, come over, man. Just one day, like, trust me, Hollywood will be there in a year. Just give me a year. Just help me build the culture here.
Huh.
And so I said, all right, I'll do it. Came for 1 year, and honestly, it was everything I wanted. I felt like I was doing what I was meant to do. And even there was some element of acting where, like, acting is really about getting in the mind of the character and like becoming it and stretching who you are to really like adopt that person. And I felt that with kids. Like, I was really able to empathize on a deep level and understand motives and help them change the way they think. And so I became dean of students at that school and did that for some time, which was amazing. But I kind of saw, okay, maybe I'm not able to. I felt like the focus of school was so academic, and that wasn't really my vibe. And I was like, where can I do youth development where youth development isn't like a nice to have, but like the focus, right? And so that drove me into the after school space. And so I really went right around the corner to the Boys and Girls Club, and I became the director there, which was really kind of the next step. It was almost like, yes, I loved working at a school because it was consistent and I had constant access to the kids that I wanted to impact. So it was awesome in that way. But the after school program was like everything I had dreamed of. And it really, like, I felt like I was living into my dad,
Really?
And so it was really special. Probably my favorite job that I'd had. I looked forward to seeing the kids every day. And we had kindergartners all the way up through high schoolers. But I kind of noticed as time went on, we're serving these K-8 students really well. And then we're just struggling consistently to engage high schoolers right before they launch into the real world. And so it's like, I'd see these kids, middle school with huge potential, who I loved, and it was great. And then I'd just lose them for some years. And then I'd see them struggling as adults to like survive. I was just like, no, something's wrong here. We can't lose them at one of the most critical moments of their trajectory. And so it just became harder and harder to engage. And so those were some of the problems that I was starting to see while I was there.
Yeah, that's obviously a very common issue. If you're a parent, you know that you can kind of lose your kid during that season. After school programs, certainly that's not unique just to Boys and Girls Club, YMCA. I mean, everywhere. And that's a really interesting insight. What kind of what have been your thoughts? What have been kind of like the stepping stones to get to ambition from that moment to now?
Yeah, I mean, the big question in youth development, not education, right? Because in education at schools, kids have to come. It's illegal not to. Yeah. But in the after school space, it's opt-in. In K-8, it's opt-in from the parents' perspective, right?
Right.
It's basically free childcare for a lot in a lot of cases in low income communities. Whereas high schoolers, you really have to like inspire them. There has to be some buy-in for them to engage. Yeah. And a big question is like, if what we're doing isn't getting them to engage, then what is? Right? Like, what do they want then? should be the question. And so meanwhile, while I'm struggling to engage teens, Dimitri landed a job at Facebook, specifically on the teens team. He was trying to figure out, like, how do you build tech for kids, right? Yes. And Facebook was doing that very well. And so he's, we're having conversations and he's like, while you're struggling over there trying to get, 40 teens a night, we're, Snapchat right now, 20 million teens. Like, it's like, look, we're not struggling with that. And so it kind of became this like very simple, like, how do we How do we leverage the ability of technology to engage teens, and not just engage teens on a local level, but engage them at scale?
Yeah.
And he's seeing the data. They're spending 8 hours a day on their phones,
Mm-hmm.
you know, a lot of that time on social media. And so it's like, how can we leverage the same strategies, techniques, mindsets to engage them in where they want to be, but with the heart of a youth developer? Because so much what he was seeing is so much of the kind of struggle that social media was placing on teens. And inadvertently, it's not like that was the goal, but a byproduct of that much attention in this virtual space might not be the healthiest for teens. And we're learning that now with this mental health crisis that we have on our hands. And so I think that became like, how do we merge these worlds and create something that can scale in a way that that many youth development organizations aren't able to?
Yeah, I just imagine you're sitting there hanging out with him after work or something, be like, dude, I just can't. I mean, where are the kids going? Where are the teenagers going? I just can't figure it out. And he's like, that's all I do all day.
Exactly. And it wasn't just where they're coming to my clubhouse.
Yeah, right.
And they're on their phones with their friends sitting next to them. I'm like, even when they're here, they're on their phones. What are these things doing to them? And the question isn't what is it doing? It's doing to them the same thing it's doing to me, the same thing it's doing to you. Right? Teens aren't that unique in that. It's addicting, and the algorithm works. And so I was watching that up close and personal, and just felt like, man, like youth development space is really unique, because you have the opportunity to really shape each individual teen and how they see the world, even how they approach school. Right? School doesn't teach how to approach school. School does school. And then the hope is that parents and coaches and youth developers can kind of form the kid. And so if we can't get them to engage, we have no chance at impacting them. And so we have to, and this is another thing about youth developers, as long as time has been around and people have been around, people have been thinking, okay, where are these kids? What's their environment? What does that individual kid need? How do they engage best? And how do we design something that's best for them? And so even like really impactful programs like the Boys and Girls Clubs and the YMCAs that rely on you come to us and we will work with you. While those are hyper effective when kids engage, what we're noticing is a shift in how kids engage. And so someone has to come in and play that role. And we saw a void there and wanted to create something to fill that void.
Okay, this is awesome. I mean, I now understand the backstory. I'm curious as we wrap this up, back to you, 4th grade, grown up in Portland, seeing youth development, you and Dimitri. The spark was lit and never stopped. How do you now, as you look towards the future with Ambition Angels, where do you see young Remi in that story? How do you understand your story in the midst of what you're trying to do? Like, what are you trying to do for kids, and how does that relate to you?
Yeah, I mean, Dimitri and I talk about this a lot. We reflect a lot in building this product. We're the product of a lot of people investing in us. We made a choice to engage, and so that was what was different about us. Like, we took advantage of every opportunity. But the people in those places, whether that be coaches or community leaders or mentors or tutors or folks to help us apply to college, like, there was no possible way that we did this on our own. No way. And I envisioned my life and Dimitri's life without youth developers, without people giving us the skills, without people giving us support, without people pouring in resources, without people opening up doors and opportunities that wouldn't have otherwise been open for us. Like, I imagine our life without that, and we're in a very different position. And unfortunately, I have friends from childhood who are in that position, right? Who maybe weren't provided those. And so what I really think about is the little Remi, but also the other kids, who we have to go get them. We have to engage them. We have to make real effort. And so the Remis and the Dimitrics, because we were thirsty for opportunities, we would find them and go get them. But for every Remi and Dimitri there are in East Palo Alto, in East Detroit, in East LA, all across the country, there are others who aren't. But here's what's amazing about now. They have a smartphone,
right?
and they're using it every day. And so we have a real opportunity. And so that's what the fire in us now is like, man, we need this to work. For the future of our people, we need this to work. And luckily there's a lot of other people who want it to work as well. And so we feel really confident about the future that yes, the little Remis and Dimitrix, but countless others who will get access to this product, get the support, that maybe they are lacking.
Yeah. Awesome. Last question. Yeah. Is Hollywood still calling you?
Still got Hollywood is not still calling me, but I watch, it's like when you play basketball, you watch the NBA a little differently. Like I watch shows a little differently. I'm in awe of actors, man. Like it is serious work, psychologically, social, emotionally. And so my daughter, who's 4, it might have skipped my generation, but she might be next. So keep an eye out for her.
Thanks, Remi. I look forward to digging in more as we kind of unpack the ambition story. And as you're listening, we hope you feel like you're a part of the story. We hope you're along for the ride. And one of the, I think, beautiful parts about this is we don't know how this story is going to end. So there's definitely an element of intrigue and surprise to us, to Remi, to Dimitri, as well as you. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks again for joining us on this episode of Road to Ambition. If you want to join our mission to empower Black and Brown teens, reach out to us at remi@ambitionangels.org. Remember to subscribe to our podcast for more thought-provoking discussions. Until next time, stay ambitious.